Yeah, he can send it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Five, six. We need two more, right, Adam? Well, I think we just start. There are no decisions today, Nate?
I don't think there's any action that needs to be taken
Got somebody
today.
coming in.
There are some
Oh,
important-
yeah, seven. Hey, Mark. Well, we're so close. I'm sorry, Nate, you were saying?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any action that needs to be taken today, but we do have some important topical updates.
All right, well.
Want to get
We
going?
can, let's go ahead. Let's do our thing.
Good morning, everybody. This is Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission Technical Advisory Committee meeting. Like to call the meeting to order. Give a roll call.
Yeah, let's do a roll call. All right, so I'll do it in alphabetical order. From Derry, George Sioris, Francistown virtually, we have Linda Kuhnhart.
Here and present for minutes, or we don't have minutes.
Right, we're not doing minutes. We don't have a in-house quorum. From Hooksett, we have Bruce Thomas.
Yeah.
From Londonderry virtually, we have Kelly Walsh. Hi, Kelly, you there? Just have to unmute yourself. Okay, maybe Kelly stepped away. From Manchester, we have Jason Cleghorn, and Jason, is that how you say your name?
Correct.
And great,
Present.
welcome to your first TAC meeting.
Thank you.
And also from Manchester, we have virtually Kristen Clark.
Good morning.
And, all right. Let's see, from New Boston, we have Mark Sunan.
Here.
We have from Easter Seals, Fred Roberge,
Here.
Fred. And from the Derry Londonderry Chamber, we have Nancy
Here.
Michaels.
Here.
From DHS, what am I saying DHS? From New Hampshire DES, we have Tim White virtually.
Good morning. Yeah, Tim White, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, Air Resources Division.
Thank you, Tim. Tim's last TAC before he retires. And then we have Ricky DeCillo.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Ricky. Oh, you have a great background. Very nice. And let's see, I'm also a voting member. This is Sylvia Von Aulich from Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. We have many staff. We have Carl Epic. There's Carl. We have Ben Herbert, our mobility manager. Adam Hlasny is behind me. We have Kevin Lawson online. We have Cam Perlman online. We have our famous Nate Miller in the back. We have our newest member, Suzanne Nene. Let's see, I don't know, is Zach on? Yeah, there's Zach Swick, our GIS guru. And we, of course, Tammy Zamoyski, our co-host and helper on all things Zoom. Did I miss any? Oh, and we have Lee Levine from Federal Highways. Hi, Lee.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
And let's see if our friend Kelly Walsh is back from Londonderry.
She put a note in the chat that she was there, but her mic is not working.
Oh, thank you for that. Tammy, if you could also keep track of the chat.
I don't see anything in the chat.
Really?
Yeah, my chat box is empty.
Mine is one chat. I'm here, issue with Mike. Oh,
She might have
yeah.
only sent it to you instead of everyone.
Oh,
It's everyone.
all right. Well, we're all set.
I can't see it. So if anybody else does put something in the chat and we don't respond, it's because I might not see it. So feel free to
Okay.
unmute and let us know.
All right, perfect. We're all set.
Okay. Looks like still no quorum, so we'll skip over the review of the notes from 2 months. So new business, 10-year plan update from Nate Miller, Deputy Executive Director.
Okay. I'm going to attempt to share the screen properly on the first try. Make no guarantees. Oh, here we go. Oh, wait a second. That might work for everyone. Did everyone online see this full screen?
We see it's not in presentation mode on Zoom.
Oh, all right. Let's see. How about now?
Yep, looks
Okay.
good.
All right. I don't know why it defaults to this presentation mode. I've never voluntarily used presentation mode before, but okay, so some updates on, we continue to work hard on the fiscal 25 to 34 10-year plan process. We talked in some depth about this last month, but to give you a sense of where we are, all of our candidate projects have now undergone engineering review and evaluation, and we have identified and submitted a short list of regional candidate projects to DOT. We'll talk about that a little later in this presentation. So since our last meeting, our on-call engineering firm, VHB, has continued. We've worked closely with them to refine project scopes and cost estimates. We were fortunate to have the funding to be able to do that for all 7 of our project candidates. And we were doing this really to maximize the use of our regional allocation, which is $10.56 million. And is Tammy admitting people? Do we need to admit people? So we were really looking with our engineering firm at sort of three different aspects. What are some lower cost design options for some projects? What are the phasing opportunities for other projects? And what may be alternative approaches to advance projects? Because at first glance, some of the projects were substantially larger by themselves than we could fund with our regional allocation. So we always try to make the highest and best use of our regional allocation. And thankfully, we were able to work with our engineer to look at phasing options, design options, and alternative approaches in some cases. And now it doesn't want to advance. Okay, here we go. I'm going to go in alphabetical order here. We've talked a little bit about some of these projects, but the first, so alphabetical order by town. So this is the town of Bedford. Their Route 101 safety improvement project from Wallace Road to the Amherst town line. We actually did a lot of work with VHB on this. VHB was really helpful. They developed both 3-lane and 5-lane alternative concepts for this segment of 101. Obviously, both of those concepts, even phased, were substantially higher than our regional 10-year plan allocation. Beyond that, both the 3-lane and the 5-lane options both have their own pros and cons. So there were merits to both. And in consultation with the town, we determined that the best path forward to figure out what the long-term preferred alternative for the corridor should be was to take a look at updating the 2002 corridor study of Route 101. A lot obviously has changed in the last 20 years on that corridor. On the other side of Wallace Road, there have been a substantial improvement project. There's been development happening. Things are different in 2022 than they were in 2002. So it made sense to everyone to look at updating the 2002 corridor study to reflect current conditions, and through that process would allow for DOT, the town of Bedford, and the public to evaluate the merits of the 3-lane, 5-lane, and potentially other concepts that could be pursued for the long-term needs of the corridor. So we did ask VHB to estimate the cost of updating the 2002 corridor study, and that cost was $300,000 in current year dollars. The second project proposal from the town of Bedford was the construction of a multi-use path adjacent to Route 101. We talked about this last month. There aren't really any changes to this project, although we did ask VHB to break down the costs into two different segments so that we could potentially consider phasing in the future. So the total amount of total cost to construct a multi-use path all the way from Wallace Road to the town line was 3.1 million. But if you look at the section between Wallace Road and Elk, that would be just under 1.7 million. And the section from this Elk to the Amherst town line would be about 1.4 million. So that breaking it down, allowed us to look at different phasing alternatives for the project. In the town of Deerfield, not a lot of changes to this project since we last discussed it in October. This is a roundabout conversion, a 4-leg roundabout for the intersection of Route 107, Candia Road, and Church Street. It was previously proposed in the last 10-year plan update cycle and remains the town's top priority for inclusion in the 10-year plan. The total cost in current year dollars was estimated to be 1.557 million. And as I noted last month, the design tries to minimize impacts to historic properties, but still would have some level of historic property impacts, including the removal of growth trees on one property. In the town of Londonderry, the first project proposal was to increase capacity on Route 28 from the intersection of Sims and Vista Ridge Drive to the intersection of 128. If you recall, we do have a significant project in the 10-year plan already to improve the intersection of 28 and 128, and this would kind of continue that with improvements on 28 up to Sims and Vista Ridge Drive. The project would expand Route 28 to a 5-lane cross section with a dual use center turn lane. The intersection itself of 28 and Vista Ridge and Sims Drive would include additional turn lanes, and in one of the approaches that would actually be 7 lanes wide, and the other approach would be 6. So the 7-lane approach, I believe, would have 3 through lanes, 2 left turn lanes, and 2 right turn lanes. And so it would be a very significant, large intersection at the end of the project. Our engineer advised that number of lanes actually may be excessive. And so that was something that we looked closely at. The other thing that we worked with VHB on was developing alternatives that would include sidewalks, and one cost alternative that would include sidewalks and one that wouldn't, so we could see the cost difference there. The project cost is estimated to be $10.4 million in 2022 dollars without sidewalks and $11.3 million with sidewalks. Obviously, that level of cost exceeds the commission's regional 10-year plan allocation. Looking at phasing opportunities for this project was challenging because the intersection improvements are the most significant cost component of the project, but also provide the most congestion benefits. And so a phased version of the project that didn't include that wouldn't necessarily provide tangible benefits. So as proposed here, it's sort of an all or nothing in order to derive any sort of congestion benefit. And for that reason, it's likely that this project will need some continued work and collaboration between us and the town of Londonderry and VHB to potentially consider alternatives to this project. What could be done at a lower cost, maybe more focused on safety, that would provide a capacity benefit, but also a safety benefit. So I think there's more homework that we will need to do on this project in advance of the next 10-year plan cycle, but we have a good starting point for those discussions now. The second project from the town of Londonderry was the construction of phase 7 of the Londonderry Rail Trail from Route 28 to the Derry town line. This is the final section of rail trail in the town of Londonderry. It would involve the construction of a 10-foot wide paved rail trail. The crossing of Route 28 is a tricky component of this. Route 28 is a busy road where this rail trail would cross. And it would necessitate a pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is, we have now a couple of them in the region. If you're familiar with the crossing at the Goffstown Rail Trail, that is a pedestrian hybrid beacon, essentially a user-activated red light for busy trail crossings, is essentially what it is. There's also a crossing of Beaver Brook. There was a bridge there once upon a time. The abutments still exist there, and VHB is proposing to reuse those abutments and install concrete deck panels to support the trail crossing there. Total project cost estimate for this is $641,000 in current year dollars. At our encouragement, we have encouraged the town of Londonderry, and they have done so. They have submitted a letter of intent to apply for congestion mitigation and air quality, or what we call CMAQ funding for this project. And if they do ultimately apply and are successful, this could allow the project to begin as early as 2025. So just a note there that the CMAQ solicitation is happening concurrently here, and we have encouraged the town to concurrently apply for that funding. In the city of Manchester, the top priority project is Exit 8 improvements at Wellington Road. This is a series of intersections on Wellington Road at the Exit 8 interchange. This was, I think everybody here is probably somewhat familiar with this project. It was proposed in the last 10-year plan cycle. We assigned it to VHB to update the cost estimate and make certain technical updates based on what has happened in the last couple of years at the interchange. There are sort of 3 different components of the project. There's a signal coordination and adaptive signal control component. There is a bicycle lane component, and there's an intersection capacity improvement component. So in consultation with the city and with VHB, we looked closely at what the phasing options were for this project, and ultimately arrived at a preferred phasing scenario of doing the intersection capacity improvements with limited bicycle lanes in the area of the intersection capacity improvements, and then potentially doing the remaining bicycle lanes as a future phase or a phase 2 of this project. And doing that, it would be a cost in today's dollars of $4.124 million. In the town of Windham, their project proposal was improvements to the Windham Greenway from Meeting House and Old Mill Road to the westerly right-of-way of Interstate 93. It's a little over 2¼ miles. It is a conversion of an abandoned railroad right-of-way into a 10-foot wide paved multi-use path. The project cost, we actually had VHB do a little bit more work on this project because there is a state-owned section of this corridor on the east side of 93. On the west side of 93, I believe it's a town-owned section. On the east side, it's a state-owned section, but improvements would need to be made also on the east side to safely connect to the Fremont branch of the Rockingham Rail Trail. And on the east side, what that would be is largely a pedestrian hybrid beacon at Lowell Road. So we asked VHB to break down the costs of doing that, what improvements would be needed west of 93 and what improvements would be needed potentially on the state-owned section east of 93. Again, at our encouragement, the town of Windham has submitted a letter of intent to apply for congestion mitigation and air quality program funding. If they ultimately apply and are successful in that pursuit, again, this could allow the project to begin as early as fiscal year 2025. Some funding notes here. I mentioned our regional allocation did increase proportionately with the increase in federal formula funding that the state of New Hampshire as a whole is receiving through the recent infrastructure bill, which some people refer to as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Other people refer to as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It is the same thing by two different names, so you may hear it referred to as both. Suffice it to say, there was an increase in formula funding for New Hampshire that came through that legislation, and we are seeing a proportional increase in our regional allocation as a result of that. The regional allocation for our region, as I mentioned before, is $10.56 million on a year of expenditure basis. And a year of expenditure basis in this case means that we are assuming that these projects, that any new project that goes into the 10-year plan goes to the back of the line in the 10-year plan. So that means that we need to apply inflation of 2.8% per year out to that year of expenditure, which is assumed to be 10 years from the present. We also need to, before adding inflation, need to add 10% to the project cost to support New Hampshire DOT's indirect expenses. So we have done that for all of our project cost estimates, as I will review in a few minutes. To develop initial priorities, we have a TAC evaluation work group that worked with our staff to evaluate the projects according to the regional criteria. That work group was comprised of George Sioris of Derry, Mark Sunan of New Boston, and Linda Kuhnhart of Francistown. Working with our staff, all three of those communities, Derry, New Boston, and Francistown, did not have active applications for projects. So it was sort of an initial jury of your peers type of evaluation by people that don't have skin in the game. And so they did their work, and I will review that in a moment. And we sent our initial priorities to New Hampshire DOT last week, and our final priorities are due to New Hampshire DOT by March 31st of 2023, and those will be we'll use the initial priorities obviously as a starting point, and then our TAC can make any accept those or tweak those as they see fit and make a recommendation to the MPO, and our MPO would take action on those final priorities prior to March 31st of 2023. Before that point, DOT will also be reviewing these projects and will provide us comments on the engineering analyses and cost estimates that were done. So before we get to the regional priority stage, we wait obviously for our review comments from New Hampshire DOT, which typically come early in the new calendar year. So our priorities, based on the evaluation work group's initial analysis, the following 4 projects can be fully funded within the regional allocation and rose to the level of initial priorities, those being the Route 101 corridor study update in Bedford, the intersection capacity improvement with limited bicycle lane scenario for the Manchester Exit 8 interchange improvement project, the Deerfield roundabout conversion project at Route 107, Candia Road and Church Street, as well as phase 7 of the Londonderry Rail Trail. 2 additional projects will remain under consideration for this 10-year plan update. Those include Bedford's Route 101 multi-use path and the Windham Greenway improvements, but those are not in the batch of the initial priorities at this point. So when we submitted our initial priorities to DOT, typically they ask for a fiscally constrained set of initial priorities plus 1 to 2 projects. Our fiscally constrained set of initial priorities are those 4 projects: Bedford, Manchester, Deerfield, and Londonderry. The 2 additional projects that we included that we are considering to be remaining under consideration are the Route 101 multi-use path and the Windham Greenway improvements. What does that look like from a financial perspective? So all of those numbers in current year dollars that I talked about are here in this project cost column. After including 10% for New Hampshire DOT indirect costs on a current year basis, we arrive at this. And then after applying 10 years of inflation at 2.8% per year, we arrive at these numbers on a year of expenditure basis as the total project costs. So our initial priorities were $9.6 million. Our regional allocation is 10.558 million. So we came in under the regional allocation by $957,000. That is not a bad thing because frankly, the 2.8% per year inflation number may end up going up. And if it does, we will have the ability to absorb some of that inflationary increase with the extra difference that we have in our regional allocation. So I think we're in a reasonably good position to if that 2.8% number goes up, we may be able to absorb that and still be constrained within our regional allocation, depending on what that final number is. So that's a lot to throw at you in the last half hour, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I just wanted to mention that we had 2 comments in the chat box, which I think you already addressed, but Kay Walsh said that we did apply for CMAQ funds for the Phase 7 rail trail project. I believe that was for Londonderry.
Yes.
And then William Rose says indirect cost 10% only applied to New Hampshire DOT managed projects. An inflation rate is being reviewed in advance of draft 10-year plan. 2.8% is the current rate and recommendation.
Yes, correct. So we applied based on DOT guidance. We applied the indirect costs of 10% to all projects. It may be that one or more of these projects ultimately ends up being municipally managed. In that case, the 10% DOT indirects would not necessarily apply to that project. But we generally wait until the DOT returns comments, and those comments may include whether or not they envision it to be municipally managed or not, or locally matched, which may be the case for some of the bicycle pedestrian oriented projects. I'll stop sharing now. And yes, Jason. Nice to meet you, by the way, and thank you for being here.
Regarding the number 1 ranked project, I realize that the previous corridor study is from 2002, but does anyone know if that study made a call between, like, did it recommend X number of lanes at that time?
The 2002 corridor study had a 5-lane scenario recommended as part of it. Things have changed since then. And the 5-lane concept may still ultimately, have merits to consider, but some things have changed, including the DOT's recent reconstruction of the Pulpit Brook Bridge on the far western side of the corridor, which is not constructed to a 5-lane width. So some infrastructure constraints have already been put in place that somewhat mitigate the viability of a 5-lane concept. So for that reason, we think it makes sense to go back to the drawing board and look at the 3-lane is a 3-lane with a median throughout. And my understanding is that some of the communities the west of Bedford are also considering a 3-lane alternative with a median, so that there may be some consistency there with that potential scenario. So for all of those reasons, we thought it made sense to revisit the corridor study.
Thank you.
I had a question real quick. Nate, were Londonderry and Wyndham the only ones who applied for CMAQ? I was just curious because of Bedford's multi-use path.
Bedford has another project that they had already intended to apply for and have submitted a letter of intent accordingly. It's a sidewalk project in a different part of the community.
Oh, yes, that makes sense.
Any more questions?
From our virtual group, any? I don't see any. And I'm just gonna quick mention, Bruce, that we have added Jillian Harris, Rebecca Hebert from Bedford, William Rose from DOT, Mike Witten from MTA, Craig Tufts from Central Hampshire Planning Commission. I think I got them all.
I would note that I'd like to thank the evaluation subcommittee for the time that they spent working with us. We had them participating in a few different meetings over the course of the last number of weeks, and ultimately, the evaluation process, it's a fairly well-rounded series of priority projects. There are urban projects, there's rural projects, there are safety projects, there are congestion-related projects, there are bicycle pedestrian projects, there are studies. A fairly well-rounded group of initial priorities came out of that process. So thank you to all the members of the evaluation work group for the time that you volunteered in that effort.
Nate, just for clarity for the group, when we definitely will want a quorum, which will mean we'll want one more person from our virtual audience to come to the meeting that is a TAC member. Will that meeting where there's a vote be in February or March or?
It will likely, if it's possible to do it in February, we would prefer to do it in February, and be complete earlier than later, but part of that will depend on when we get feedback from the DOT through their review process.
All right, so we'll give everybody a heads up when we absolutely need that quorum.
Okay, so do we have a quorum now? Or-
No,
Oh,
we're one short.
I
Okay.
usually come, but I have a commitment at like 11:30, 11:15 here in town, so it's convenient not to have to drive in and not be able to make it back.
Oh, absolutely. We completely understand and we're fine today. We'll let the group know when we definitely will need that quorum.
Well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, pathways to play project update by Tammy Zamoyski, Regional Planning Commission.
Take it away, Tammy.
Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm going to be giving you guys a project update for the Pathways to Play project. I realize that we haven't talked about this since February, so I'm going to start off with a little overview. This project was funded by the New Hampshire Children's Health Foundation, and it was inspired by the success of Stratford Regional Planning Commission's 2019 Pathways to Play project. The overall goal is to prevent childhood obesity in the region. So we want to do that by assessing barriers to recreation, providing communities with tools to promote the recreational facilities that they have, and assist one community with a pilot project. So in order to do that for this project, we are going to produce one regional recreation asset GIS layer showing all of the facilities in the region. We're going to conduct a resident survey. We're going to provide one map for each SNHPC community, and then we'll be doing one community pilot program at the end. So we launched this project back in January of this year. We started off by organizing a stakeholder group made up of members from our communities. We also started by doing some preliminary mapping and GIS exercises so that we could document all of the recreational facilities in the region. From March to October, we worked with the stakeholder group to develop a resident survey. We just closed that survey, so in the next few slides, I'll have a little bit of an overview of some of the results that we received. We're now in the community outreach process, so we are sharing the results of the surveys with stakeholders as well as the public. And in May of next year, we will start the community pilot program, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So the responses that I'm going to share with you today represent the region as a whole. We had a total of 258 responses. 18 of them came from residents outside of our region, so their responses were not included in this analysis. So as you can see, well done, New Boston and Chester. New Boston turned up with 69 results and Chester had 57. 78% of the people who responded to this survey identified as parents of children aged 5 or younger. 14% were grandparents, and others were teachers, guardians, caregivers, or educators. So one of the survey questions was, what types of recreational facilities do the children in your life enjoy within your own community? These were open-ended responses, so I categorized each of them. We got a little bit of everything. 28% of people said that their children prefer playgrounds, 21% said parks, 17% said trails, 10% said rail trails, particularly. 9% said sports fields, 6% said aquatic facilities, including splash pads and beaches. 5% said nature areas, and 4% said indoor facilities such as gyms. These facilities were most often accessed by driving, 93% of people, walking, 25%, or biking, 11%. And in case you're wondering why that adds up to more than 100%, people were able to choose more than one option. About 54% of people said that they and members of their household are able to participate in active recreation facilities as often as they would like. About 46% said that they are not. And of those 46%, the top reasons given were a lack of personal time or too busy, lack of facilities or play space that interests the children near me, a lack of desired programs, or the facilities are just too far away. This question said, whether for the first time or just more frequently, what might help you to visit recreational facilities in your neighborhood or community? 60% of people said if they knew what amenities were at the facility. 54% said knowing the locations of the facilities and how to get there. 36% said having a safe route to walk, ride a bike, ride a scooter, or other. 17% of respondents listed other reasons, including having more facilities available, concerns over safety and crime, and more information or wayfinding. And then 7% said that knowing if there was a bus, van, or shuttle that got us there and back would be helpful. 44% of respondents said that they would be able to get to these facilities easier if they had sidewalks or walking paths. And 22% said that bicycle facilities would help them. And then 33%, so about a third of people, said that there was nothing to help them get to recreational facilities easier. So that suggests that there may not be access issues for a lot of people. So of all the respondents, only 6% said that they were familiar with public transportation options that would take them to the recreational facilities in their neighborhood or in their town. 26% said that they are not familiar, and 68% said there is no public transportation in their town. And just keep in mind that most of the responses that we received came from New Boston and Chester. And in case you're wondering what the public transit options are for the region, public transit's available in the city of Manchester, as well as Chester, Derry, Londonderry, Goffstown, Hooksett, and New Boston. So you can see on the map here, fixed route service is available in Manchester. That's the yellow bus. The white van signifies the free shuttle, which is available in New Boston, Goffstown, and Hooksett. And then the blue van is the cart shuttle service, which is available in Londonderry, Derry, and Chester. So of those people who said that they were familiar with the transit options, none of them have actually used them, but 15% of respondents said that they would like to try public transportation. So if you do the math, that turns out to about 14 people, which is not insignificant. "50 respondents also left additional comments or ideas about how to improve access to the recreational facilities. So the most common themes including investing more in recreational facilities, providing more information on facilities or the programs that are available, having more options for toddlers and very young children, having more access to aquatic activities like public beaches, lakes, splash pads, and swimming pools, having sidewalks, and having more facilities nearby." So over the coming months, we will be presenting all of these survey responses to the individual towns. For some towns, we didn't get enough to really be meaningful, so we will present the responses that we had and then have a conversation with the stakeholders to see if they've received any additional feedback or if the feedback that we received kind of aligns with other comments that they're hearing throughout the community. We'll also be sitting down to ground truth the draft recreation maps that we put together for accuracy to make sure that we didn't miss or overlook any of the facilities in the towns. And then we'll work together with the stakeholders to figure out the most meaningful way to present all of that information to the public. So here's an example map. This was from the town of Barrington, New Hampshire, from the Stratford Pathways to Play project. I apologize, the legend is really small, but this map shows where baseball fields, soccer fields, open space and trails are. And then it also highlights how to get there. So it shows the roads, the bicycle routes, the trails. We may even want to include parking. A lot of the rail trails have only certain areas where you can park, so access is important. And as I've mentioned a few times, during the second phase of the project, which will begin in May, the stakeholder group will be choosing one community to receive assistance for a pilot project. So together we'll be using the results of the survey, the mapping analysis, and feedback from the stakeholders to address barriers to accessing the facilities in the town that we choose. And of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to myself or Cam or our newest employee, Suzanne.
Now go.
Any immediate questions for Tammy?
Any suggestions for our team from any of the community representatives?
And if anybody would like to be a part of the stakeholder group and help us to review the maps and the survey results for your town, just shoot me an email. I'd be happy to have you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Okay, thank you. Next up is review of the 2022 traffic counting season by Adam Hlasny, Senior Transportation Commission.
Bear with me for a second here, please. All right, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So just here to give a brief review of our traffic counting season that is just wrapping up as we speak. There we go. So our 2022 field team was Ben up until July when he became mobility manager. He was replaced by Kevin, who's our assistant planner. And then Cam and myself were out there one day a week each. Also, it's not on here, but Tammy filled in nicely the first month of the season until Ben was out of school. Sorry, there's a little delay on the advancing the slides here. All right. So just some basics. Many of you might be familiar with our counting program. We have 1,200 total traffic counts that we do on a 3-year cycle, and that's roughly half split between DOT requests and counts for the SNHPC model. We count to keep up the state and regional databases, try to do some trend research, what's happening pre and post COVID has been a trending topic lately, and DOT came to do a presentation for us a few months ago on some of the early trends there. We also take municipal requests, so we had a few towns request counts this year, and we're always happy to work with our towns to incorporate those counts. Both NHDOT and SNHPC have interactive maps, and I do have them up if we can.
You would have to
We have to
stop
stop.
sharing. I don't know, ask them if
Can we,
this is a
can everyone see
PDF.
this, or?
Yeah.
No, we can just see your slideshow.
Okay, so let me reshare the browser. So this is our SNHPC count database. Each dot on here is a count, and they're color coded. The darker the dot is the greater traffic volume. I have one clicked here, Candia Road west of East Industrial Park Drive. And what you see here is the AADT is average annual daily traffic. That's the amount of cars that go over the count site in a given day, all the way back to 2001. And as I mentioned, we count most sites every 3 years. So you can see what 2010 was the highest volume for this particular site, and then it's decreased quite a bit. We only have up to 2019 on our interactive map at this point. We need to wait for factors from NHDOT for the 2020 COVID year to get that posted. So that's why we're only up to 2019 here. And if I could switch to the DOT count viewer. This one there's a lot more information. It's a little, there's a lot of information to digest, I guess. So I'm zoomed into Derry over here, and one particular site that's selected here on Route 28, the Derry town line, Londonderry town line. We have the 2022 count has been posted. I don't know if that's been factored yet or not. DOT applies factors to these counts to, I guess, normalize the numbers over the course of a year. And you can see over to the left here, the counts for the last few years. You can go further back if you want. The ADTs are right here. Each 3 years, we have a new count, and then they grow the counts with whatever formula they use. And you can click on any site to get information, or you can search. They have a search function as well, and this can be found on the homepage of DOT's site under traffic data, I think. So it's a useful tool if you ever need to know a traffic volume at a given site. So let's go back to the presentation. So we have 3 main types of counts that we do. About 80% of our counts are simple volume only counts. So if you go over a single tube in the road, that's just counting the overall volume at that site, both directions in one sum amount. Directional counts are done with 2 tubes, which allows the counter on the side of the road to differentiate which directions the vehicles are going. And then a class count, we normally use 2 knotted tubes. That's what this one is here. The knots are very small. You can't see them, but right in the center of the road, we do a counter on each side of the road. Each side will count the class of vehicles on that side of the road. And this very sophisticated drawing here, it shows what type of vehicles fall into each class. Typically, a class count will show probably 80–90% regular passenger cars, and then you see a decent amount of motorcycles in the summer, and class 3, a lot of pickup trucks would be the second most common class. So at a glance this year, we had 390 locations in all 14 of our communities. The season began way back in early April, and it is just wrapping up as we speak. We have our final pickups on Monday, and if the last 2 counts that are out there are successful, we will have had a 100% success rate, which we're very proud about. We do 15 to 20 counts every week. There are failures that we need to redo. Typically, I'd say 2 to 3 a week. So that's why if you do the math, 31 times 20 does not equal 390. There are also weeks that have a holiday in them that we cannot count DOT sites because the volumes would be affected by holiday travel. And here's a little breakdown by town. The map over here, I have it color coded. This helps me when I plan out the weekly route for the counts. The blue map pins are SNHPC counts. And then there are 3 colors for DOT counts. The green pins are regular volume, purple are class, and then black is class and directional. So that's that more complex setup that I just went through. As you can see, Manchester has the lion's share of the counts, no surprise there. All the way down to Francistown, we only had 6 this year, but next year would be year B of the 3-year cycle, and these numbers will be slightly different. We might have 20 in Francistown next year and only 10 in New Boston, for instance. So this, I apologize if it's small. This is a weekly set list. So this is a screenshot of the sheet that we bring out into the field. What it has on here is the town or municipality, the count ID that we input into the counter itself. A 12-digit ID means it's a DOT count. A 6-digit ID means it's an SNHPC count. The location of the count, and then here's our AADT column. And that helps us for 2 reasons. It gives us a sense of how busy it's going to be when we get out there. And also when we pick up a counter and we see the volume, how close is it to last year's count? So this one is 22,000. If we pick up a count and it's showing 8,000, we know there's something wrong and we need to redo it. And this is just some of the maps I do each week that I try to make it as efficient as possible in the field. We don't want to get lost or waste time looking for counts, so I try to make it as obvious as possible. We had a handful of municipal requests this year in Bedford, Chester, and Derry. And this little chart is an example of a report that I made for Bedford. So what we're looking at here is Meeting House Road. This was just done about a month ago, and we're comparing weekday versus weekend data. So across the bottom, this is 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., etc., all the way to midnight. Obviously, there's a huge peak at 8 a.m.'s typical commuting time. Goes down in the middle of the day, stays pretty steady, and then goes up again around 6, 7 p.m. Something that DOT taught us a few months ago was that they're seeing around the state less of a sharp peak for the PM commute because people have more flexible schedules. They can leave their office at 3 instead of 5 and make up the time or whatever arrangement they might have. So in the past, this peak would have been more substantial, more similar to the AM peak here. And then weekend, as you can see, it increases around 10 a.m. and it's pretty steady right through till about 6 p.m. at this particular location. So a few challenges in 2022. This year, DOT had asked us to do, which I think is a federal highway requirement, do a lot more of our counts as class counts, about 30% of our overall counts. So we had 57 this year versus only 14 last year. And while it's doable, we do have to plan out our equipment accordingly, and the setups take longer. So that's something we had to factor into our schedule. Construction and weather delays, pretty self-explanatory, but we had several sites that we had to keep delaying. One of them is Queen City Avenue, the construction over here. It's still not finished. So we had to postpone that for the whole season. And then getting new staff up to speed. I have it here as a challenge, but really it went very well. Give great credit to Ben, Cam, and Kevin for Ben and Cam for teaching Kevin, teaching him the ropes quickly and getting him up to speed. It was a very seamless transition, and everyone did a great job out there. This is just a little fun chart that Zach came up with for me. 5 of our busiest locations. This is 101 in Bedford pictured here, but number 1 was Route 102 west of I-93 with 34,000 ADT. 3 of the 5 are in Bedford. Folks are probably familiar with a lot of these spots. we always prioritize safety. Some of these, we just have to take our time and be careful out there. Thankfully, many of these have a median, so we can stretch a tube across one side of the road and take refuge in the median and then do the other side when the traffic goes down a bit. We also try to time the setup, so we're out there at 10 or 11 a.m. instead of 8. We do what we can to keep everyone safe. And then the least busy locations, this is a little bit different. These are all extremely easy setups, and quite frankly, sometimes we wonder why we're counting there, but that's what we're there to do, is get data every 3 years on all these locations. So this picture is actually from Deerfield because I couldn't find a good shot of these spots, but that's the other end of the traffic counting coin. So that's all I had. Kim, Kevin, or Ben, is there anything you wanted to add? Because you were important part of the team this year.
Nope. Just want to thank you, Adam, Ben, and Kevin for keeping us all on track this year. Like you said, we had some staff transition, so we made the best of it this year. So thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Excellent. Oh, we have a question.
Have you been able to make any sort of 30,000 foot overview, big picture takeaways? Are we returning to pre-COVID traffic? Are we still behind? Like, what is the kind of big picture for the region?
I mean, as I said, we wait for DOT to factor these counts, so I don't want to make any, concrete statements. However, just my observation is that we are pretty much back to where we were. In some cases, we're even above that, depending. There's, with all these sites, I can't really, make a statement for all of them, but I'd say one of the biggest things is the afternoon peak is less of a peak. It's just more from 2-3 o'clock right through 6 o'clock is pretty heavy volume.
Question.
Adam, question. The FAST Act is requiring all public roads, not just wherever DOT and SNHPC choose to count, but all public roads to be counted in 2026 and beyond. How have you started to transition to build your inventory to hit that mark?
Well, we have, the first we heard of that was back in the spring at the DOT meeting with all the RPCs. And it's just, it was kind of just a heads up at this point, and we're going to be working with them to ramp up what we need to do. We do the SNHPC counts. We can share that data with them, so that fills in a lot of what they're looking for already. But still very preliminary for physically how we're going to do that differently.
Okay. And they may end up looking at things like technology or probe data to infer some of those volumes also. So I guess, those discussions are ongoing. We are better positioned, I think, in our region, simply because we do the volume of counts that we do for our purposes. A lot of our colleagues may just do DOT assigned counts. We do a lot of counts beyond that for the purpose of our travel demand model. So we have a lot more coverage already in our 14 communities than just the DOT assigned counts. So we're already we're starting in a better position, I think, in our region, but I know that our colleagues in the Bureau of Traffic, Stuart Thompson and his team, are looking at potentially, crowdsource probe data, other things to defensively quantify volumes using other means perhaps than just road tubes.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You and your team. Thank you. Any other business?
I'd love to include Ben for a quick update on work with the mobility managers, so the TAC members know about what's happening with mobility management.
And introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Benjamin Herbert. I am the Region 8 Mobility Manager. And I'll just give you guys a quick update on what's been happening in the last month. How does this look?
Still in PowerPoint mode.
Hmm.
We've got a frozen blue circle, spinning circle. Oh, there we go.
Cool.
We're good.
Yeah. So just an update on what mobility management is. It's been referred to as a customer-centered approach where we work directly with customers to meet their individual needs. It's been referred to as a facilitator for coordination because we work directly with transit agencies throughout the region, building coordination and improving their services and improving efficiency. And it's also been referred to as a social worker for transportation. A lot of people I work with are people who are historically disadvantaged and need a lot of access to public transportation. This includes older adults, people with disabilities, immigrants, BIPOC individuals, and so on. And one of the main cores of ability management is helping people maintain independence. A lot of people are not able to drive themselves due to factors that prohibit them from doing such. So when it comes to maintaining independence, it includes things like getting them to medical appointments, doing grocery runs, any other essential errands, pharmaceutical needs, recreation, employment, and socializing too. And this is just the region that I cover. This is Region 8. There are 8 regions throughout New Hampshire, and this one that I serve covers all of SNHPC except for Francistown. And in addition, I also cover Salem, Atkinson, Plastow, Hampstead, Danville, Sandown, and Raymond. So there's 2 things I'll go over in this presentation. The first thing I'll talk about is the 2022 Londonderry Senior Expo. I was reached out to by a member of the Londonderry Senior Resource Committee and a Londonderry resident asking me to set up a table here essentially and send and survey attendance on their transportation needs. So I did that. We had 21 participants in the survey and 90% of those participants lived in Londonderry. And so we asked them where within their weekly routine do they usually need to go to. And the most common destinations were Londonderry at 76%, followed by Manchester at 53%, Derry at 43%, and then Pelham and Windham at 19%. The farthest destination that we got was Hanover, which is roughly 87 miles away from Londonderry. And 3 of the respondents mentioned that they traveled to Massachusetts as part of their weekly routine. We also asked outside of their weekly routine where they like to travel to. And Boston was the most popular answer at 47%, followed by Concord and Portsmouth at 32%, and then Manchester at 21%. And this question and the question before, people were allowed to give multiple answers. So in this one, people or towns within Massachusetts had more responses than towns and cities in New Hampshire. There were 8 people who would only want to travel to Massachusetts, 7 only wanted to stay within New Hampshire, and then 5 wanted to travel in both New Hampshire and Massachusetts. And that's just for outside the weekly routine. And then we asked what kind of transportation that they use as part of the daily routine. People were also allowed to select multiple answers for this. 18 of them still drive themselves. 6 of them either get a ride from a relative or friend, or they walk, and 3 of them do cycling, and then only 1 uses a bus, and 1 mentioned that they use the taxi or Uber service. And we also asked them how difficult would it be for people to get to where they need to go if they weren't able to drive themselves. And we kind of range it on a scale of not at all difficult all the way to very difficult. And so 3 people said it wouldn't be difficult at all to them. 2 people said that it varies, it just kind of depends on the situation. But 4 people said it would be difficult, and 12 people said it would be very difficult. So it gives us an idea of just how people are dependent on driving themselves and how much things change for them once the ability to drive is taken away from them. And then we asked if they've considered using community transit options, why haven't they? And the most common response at just under 30% was they don't know any services that they can use. They also said that they prefer driving alone, they're nervous to try, or they're unsure how they work, and they don't have a need for services at the moment. But the fact that they don't know any services that they can use being the most common reason for not using any public transit services or any other transit service, it tells us that there's basically a need for more outreach to happen in the future to get the word out more and make our services within the region more known. And then our last question was, what services do they use? And there was a total of 5 responses out of the 21 participants who used services. And the most common one was the Boston Express at a whopping 2 responses, followed by MTA, CART, and Meals on Wheels of Rockingham County, all at 1 response. And people were allowed to select multiple ones for this as well, but all of these responses were separate individuals. So the other thing I want to talk about is the quarterly newsletter that I've been working on for the past month. This is a newsletter that is focused on what's been happening within mobility management in our region. The purpose of this newsletter is just kind of to keep any sort of transit providers or human service agencies and anyone else that's interested about this field, just kind of keeping them in the loop of what's happening throughout the region. And some of you in here might have this with you right now. And I'll just give a quick overview of what's in this newsletter. And if you have any input to me or want to tell me what you'd like to see in this, please let me know. I open up talking about new web pages that we've all been working on. Recently, we've set up a new mobility management web page. We've been updating the volunteer driver program web page, and we've also updated the community transportation web page. This is part of an ongoing project where a team of us at SNHPC are rebuilding, revamping pages on the website, just kind of getting them more up to date and being more user friendly, I guess, or more like tailored toward the general public who want to learn more about transportation. Then I give a little introduction article as well, just introducing me as mobility manager, talking about, what my goals are based off of, all the transit services and human agencies I've met with and discussed with. I talk about, being an advocate, getting creative, bringing a variety of services, not duplicates, identifying needs. A lot of agencies have talked about, they want to see like a visualization of where those like quote unquote dead zones are for transportation. Also, recruiting more drivers and participants within their programs, because most agencies are finding it difficult to have a workforce of drivers, whether it be transit agencies or volunteer driver programs. And of course, coordination between agencies, which is more fundamental of mobility management. And then I talk about the Londonderry Senior Expo. I won't spend too much time on this because I just did for the last 10 minutes. But I include the map that you saw earlier, and then I kind of did a little snapshot of some of the questions I did and did it in a more infographic type of way, just to have it more visualized. And then at the end of every newsletter, I'm going to cap it with this final page, just going over the region, listing any upcoming events, such as the next RCC meeting, which will probably be in I don't want to give a date because it's not confirmed. And then the next statewide coordinating council meeting, which would be in January. Yeah, that's the update I have. Any questions?
Can stop sharing. Let's see if anybody else has a question. And yeah, if anyone has suggestions for Ben for the newsletter, please share. We're always, he certainly heard a lot from me, but we would like to hear from you what your thoughts are. And of course, is Mike still on yeah, Mike's still on. So Mike, if you have, your team has any thoughts, would love to know.
Yeah, no problem. It's been great working with Ben so far.
Excellent.
Any other business?
If I could just real quick, just give a quick update about our New Hampshire Clean Diesel program. We received an extension from EPA, so we are now able to advance projects projects can be completed by September 30th, 2024. So if anyone was thinking about proposing a project, something that reduces diesel emissions, things like replacing old diesel vehicles, getting electric school buses, things like that, the timeline on that's been extended by a year, and we hope that that kind of makes some of those projects a little bit more feasible. You can email me if you have any other questions, and you can check out our website if you want to see the details.
Thanks, Ricky. And I have a question, Bruce, for the group, for all our representatives. So we're coming up onto 2023 and would love to hear from the communities, any topics they'd like for us to cover. We're planning on some active transportation conversations with our communities in 2023. So just to put a little bug in your ear for future conversations, but if you have some topics you would like us to cover, please let us know so we can make sure we can add those into the agendas in 2023.
Okay. Anything else?
Bruce, if I could, I just would like to acknowledge our friend and colleague, Tim White, is retiring at the end of this month. And Tim is well known to, I think, everybody in the TAC, has been a tremendous partner in his time at New Hampshire DES to all of the MPOs, including us at the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. But beyond that, was actually an employee of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission for a number of years as well. So he is well known to us in the region, and we're sure going to miss him when he retires at the end of the month. And I just wanted to say, on behalf of all of us at SNHPC, thank you, Tim, for all of your efforts, both as an employee of the SNHPC and as a state employee, in recent years, for everything you've done to help the region.
Thank you so much, Nate. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to work with the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. Actually, over the past, I don't even want to admit how many years, as an employee and at DES. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm wishing you all the best in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. All set.
That it?
Yep.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in
right.
favor?
Thumbs
Thank
up.
you.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.
Good city.